resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz, and my guests this evening have been on once before. They were on back in, I believe it was June of 2012, and they were talking about the 11 by 15 project, and we're here tonight to kind of get an update on that project and see where things are at with it. Now, I should just say the 11 by 15 campaign for justice, it's about trying to reduce the prison population in the state of Wisconsin, and what they want to do is reduce the state prison population down to 11,000 by the year 2015. And this is, like I said, a project of wisdom. Wisdom is an acronym for something, but I'm not sure what it is. Maybe they will tell us. Maybe they won't. I don't know. And so joining us to talk about the project tonight are, to my left, Sister Mary Barbieur, Sister Mary Jo Selinsky, and to my right is Sandy Putman. And so thank you all very much for being here once again. It's always a pleasure. And you've come to my church a couple of times and talked about things, so I feel like we're old friends.
That's right.
So anyway, as I said, you were on the show the first time. It was actually August 2nd of 2012. And that was sort of as this campaign was starting to sort of kick off, and you were getting the grassroots message out there. And with 2015 like right around the corner, we wanted to check in with you and kind of see where things were at, and you know what more needs to be done. And I think you said when we were talking originally that, you know, in setting up this show, that the program has changed a little bit. So we want to get into some of the changes too. But why don't we start right now by, you know, you telling us what wisdom is, and how this sort of all came to be. And whoever wants to field that question, go for it.
I'll start it.
Okay.
Wisdom is a faith-based organization in the state of Wisconsin, and it's affiliated with Gamaliel. Gamaliel is a nationwide faith-based organization. And then in the state of Wisconsin, there are, at this point, I think there are 13 affiliates. We've had 11, and a couple more have joined. So they're given different biblical names. Some of them are acronyms, and some are not. Around the state. In our area, the Fox River Valley, it's ESTER, which is an acronym for empowerment and hope, trust, and I don't remember all of them offhand, but
nor in the order, but it's
that's
okay.
Right.
We get the message.
In the Green Bay area, it's Joshua.
Okay.
Milwaukee is Micah. So around the state, they're the affiliates. And when Wisdom does something, each group has task forces, and what we're involved with right now with the prison reform has a task force with each affiliate. So it's being worked on all around the state, and then at certain times we come together at Madison to either draw attention to it, or to visit the legislators, or to come together to plan how are we going to make it work in our area in the next few months.
Okay.
Something that might be good to add to that is that it's interdenominational.
Yes.
So they will not take on any initiative if there is one of the faiths within the organization that does not agree with that initiative. So it's an agreement of all the faiths that are participating in it.
Let me just, stop for a moment and ask a question. You said it's interdenominational. What's the difference then between it being interdenominational or non-denominational?
I guess it'd be the same thing in many ways.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Another, I think, important aspect is it's a social justice organization. We're concerned with changing systems and getting justice going.
Okay. All right. And if I could just ask you to just speak up a little bit.
All right.
No
All
one's
right.
going to bite you. I promise.
One of the task forces is TIP, treatment instead of prison, and that's one that we're pretty active in.
Okay.
And that's how the beginning of the 11 by 15 campaign, the stress was on treatment instead of prison for those who are mentally ill or nonviolent offenders who actually have other problems that cause them to do something to break the law. So instead of throwing them in prison, try to get them the treatment that they need. And in order to do that, you need the funding. So a health assessment was done for the state, and it came out that if you had $75 million, you could make it work throughout the state. Well, at that point, there was $1 million in the state budget for it, and in the previous budget, the 13 to 15 budget, $4 million was allocated. Okay. And right now, they're asking for at least $20 million in this next budget, the 2015 to 2017 budget.
Wow, $20 million in the next biennium budget. That's a lot.
It is, but what's happening, we notice, is that people are becoming aware.
Okay.
There's a lot more talk about it, and even if it's not from the point of view that we would like it to be from, which is how you treat human beings, just monetarily, it makes a lot of sense. Go ahead.
And if you remember, originally we were asking for $75 million when there was only $1 million in the budget. So we feel we've gained something by having $4 million in the budget, in this present budget. But we really are requesting at least $20 million in the next budget.
Okay.
And we know that's going to be tight for the state because of budgetary issues that are going on right now. But there are so many ways in the prison system that they could cut back in terms of money.
Could they, cutting back, and really carving out everything but the bare essentials, could they still come up with that $75 million, or is it going to take some additional funding from the state at some level?
At this point, with asking the $20 million, I believe they could come up with that if they do some of the initiatives that we're asking them to do.
Okay. So they could find the $20 million that you're
so.
seeking in this next budget.
For every person who's in a treatment alternative diversion program, it saves the state $1.96 per person.
Okay.
So,
and before we get into all the specifics and get to some of these questions and the things that you ladies want to talk about, since we're talking about the state budget, what type of support have you found from our own local legislators here, whether it's Gordon Hentz, who's about to start his, I believe, 4th term. We've got a new national or federal senator with Grothman, and our various other lawmakers. What have you found to be their response?
we meet with state legislators, those who are senators and those who are in the assembly.
Okay.
And we find a lot of support. That has increased over these 2 years now. And we meet regularly. In fact, back in September, we had a public hearing, and 6 of them came.
Okay.
And then we put specific questions to them. Will you or will you not support? And then they get their turn to say whether they will or won't, etc.
And what has their response been?
It's been very positive.
Okay.
And it's a mixture. We don't see this as a Republican or Democratic issue. We see this as an issue for our state where we need to get some reform in our prison system.
Another part of that hearing was that we had 12 speakers who had been involved in some of the treatment programs. And I think when the legislators heard that, that was very helpful to them, and we heard a lot of support for the program.
Sure. The unfortunate thing is, even though it's not a partisan issue, we always see politicians, and I don't care if they're in the assembly, the legislature, the Senate, whatever the case may be, they're always walking the party line. Rarely do you see someone, step across the aisle to someone other than their party. And there's where the problem comes in, not just for you guys, but for anyone who's trying to make any kind of a step forward with any kind of movement, whether it's grassroots or otherwise. They just want to walk that party line, and they play party politics, even if it's not partisan.
That's
or shouldn't be.
That's true, but we have seen different ones in the party line agree and say something needs to be done. Sometimes it's if they have a family member who's been in prison. Like there's one of our senators whose daughter was in prison for cocaine and has been in and out a number of times. Now he has written a law. I mean, he's authored one, to try to get something to change. And probably someone that if this hadn't happened within his own family structure might not have happened.
I'm going to ask who that is because it's a matter of public record, who's in prison and who isn't. But just for the sake of saving us from all running to our computers, who is that?
I'm trying to think of who that is. The guy up in Marinette.
Oh, Nygren.
Okay.
Senator Nygren.
I wouldn't have known that name because that's too far north.
Thank you, Sandy.
So how wide of an area do you guys in Esther cover?
We pretty much stay with our senators and representatives because we are the constituents.
Okay.
So we can go with that. We are one of your constituents. So this is what we're saying. This is,
in the Fox Valley.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fox River
So you're
Valley.
within probably the 54th Assembly District, 53rd, because I know part of the 53rd comes into Winnebago County and in this area. So, okay.
And then the other affiliates are working the rest of the state.
Okay.
Because we're all on this whole prison situation and reform for the prison system throughout the state.
Okay. All right.
Another person that we spoke to, and it was last March, I think, we went to Madison, and the Assemblyman Michael Schra, really came up with some ideas about how this could work in some ways, and so even along, party politics, he crossed over a little bit, and I thought he was helpful.
Yeah, because Michael Schra is he's a Republican from I believe the 53rd. So, okay.
And when we speak with them, we tell them what our agenda is, but also if there's anything that you see that we could help you with, we'd be more than happy to do that.
Okay.
So it's a two-way street in a lot of ways.
Sure, you're working as a partnership. You're not just walking up to them with your hand out saying,
That's right.
we need 20 million or ideally 75 million or whatever the case may be. So,
And one of the things that surprised me when we started doing this a couple years ago was they would say, if you help people around here get aware of this, because their jobs kind of depend on who's going to vote for them. And if the people are aware of it, and they're in favor of it, that's what they want. They want the people to be in favor of what they're in favor of too.
Well, and I think, I think we'd all like to see our prison system work better. But by the same token, I think we're all concerned about making sure that our streets, our neighborhood, our homes, our families are safe. And I'm sure that there are folks watching, whether it's, on this channel or on YouTube, who are saying, well, how are you going to reduce this prison population? And down to 11,000, that sounds like a lot. What is our prison population right now, as of the December 18th date of 2014?
It's
Do
about
you know?
20,000 or just a little over.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're talking about cutting the prison population, and we're talking just state prisons. We're not talking county jails, correct?
No, correct.
Okay, just state prisons. So we're talking about cutting it about 95% by 9,000 people.
Well, about half.
Okay.
I think. And, we're talking about nonviolent offenders.
Okay.
We're not talking about people who have committed violent offenses.
Okay.
And we see these nonviolent offenders basically having mental health issues and or addictions.
Okay.
And then there's a whole population now, which is another thing that Wisdom is trying to make people aware of, the elderly prisoners who are really getting up there. The statistics are over 55. If you let them out, they don't do anything anymore. They're not interested in, and especially those that are ill.
Okay.
To have compassionate release, and there are quite a few, I understand, in the state of Wisconsin who would be eligible.
Okay.
And one thing I've learned through this that I didn't know, if they're in prison, they don't get any Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. So all their health bills are paid by the taxpayer.
Okay. Do they not have to pay something, though, to the state?
If they're on work release, they do.
Okay. Okay.
And what we've learned is that it costs about $70,000 a year to incarcerate someone who has severe health problems or is aging and cannot take care of themselves in the prison system. And so not only is it a compassionate idea to release, but fiscally it makes a lot of sense because that's not what it costs to incarcerate others.
$70,000 for someone who's got health issues per year. I'm going to just play devil's advocate with you here because here's what I'm thinking. I see that, and yet if they're not in prison, because they have a prison record, what is their likelihood of finding work that supports them with a living wage? And if they can't find such work, then are they going to end up with their health problems on Badger Care or some other type of state-run or federally operated medical system where the taxpayers would still end up paying for it? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, but we're not really talking about people who would come out and have a job available to them. We're talking about some people who are terminally ill and perhaps have 6 months to 18 months to live, or someone who is very elderly. They say that there was one of the oldest people in prison was 102 years old and died there. Wow. And so some of it has to do with people being able to spend, their last part of their lives with family. And so, so they're not going to be out looking for jobs.
So does the $70,000 include care for their health problems also? Or is that just to house them, feed them?
Well, I think the state is required to take care of their health issues.
Okay, so that was the point I was trying to make, though, is that the state or somehow the taxpayers would still be footing the bill for their health care, even if they're not in prison.
That would depend upon, I think, on their age. We're talking more about those that are in their 60s and beyond for compassionate release. So we would expect that before they would release them, that they would make sure they were on the rolls for Medicare and Medicaid.
Okay, all right,
so
there we go.
Then
so
that would
helps to cover
take care of that. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank
and in
you.
many cases, there are families. I shouldn't say all cases, but in many cases, families would welcome those people back into their family unit.
Okay, all right, good. So let's sort of backtrack a little bit. How did the number 11,000 come into play? Did somebody just spin a wheel? And I'm sure it was more carefully designed than that. But, was it just an arbitrary number? Did you say we want to cut the prison population in half? How did you arrive at cutting it down to 11,000?
I really believe what happened is the people who really came up with this in the wisdom situation looked at neighboring states, particularly Minnesota. Minnesota is at about 11,000, whereas our states are similar in many ways, but we spend a lot more financially for our prison system than Minnesota does.
Okay.
And so looking at neighboring states, that's what we're doing right now too. Looking at neighboring states in terms of compassionate release, looking at neighboring states in terms of revocation, the GPS monitoring, all those areas that we're saying need some kind of revision of policies in our state.
Okay.
And they're very successful, those states that have done different things to make things happen for their prisoners.
Okay. When we talk about Minnesota being a like state, if you will, where are they at? Because I don't know this offhand. Do any of you know where they're at population-wise in comparison to us? Are they similar that way as well?
Yes.
Okay.
They're quite similar. I don't know the statistics. It's on one of the PowerPoint things we do, but it's one of the things that we compare with Wisconsin. And the population is very much the same. The amount of money people earn is quite a bit the same.
Okay. So when we're comparing Wisconsin to Minnesota, we truly are comparing
Yes.
apples to apples.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Excellent. Okay. So you want to get the prison population cut down to 11,000 by, surely it's going to be by the end of next year rather than in 1 week. We got a lot of work to do, guys.
That's right.
Okay, so other than talking to legislators and that kind of thing, and doing programs like this to help get the message out, what are you doing to get to your goal here?
Working hard.
Sure.
Yeah.
Revocation.
Well, and we have suggestions and things that we would like the state to work on, and they know that. We have a blueprint for improving the incarceration in the state of Wisconsin, and we're talking about compassionate release. We're talking about old law prisoners. There might be people who aren't even aware of that. You know, truth in sentencing came into existence in January 1st, 2000. That means if you're sentenced to 10 years, you've put in 10 years right up to the date. Whereas people who were in prison before that were old law. We refer to them as old law prisoners. So when judges sentence them, they sentence them with the idea that they knew if they worked the programs, if their behavior was good, and they put in their time, they could get out on parole. Well, these old law prisoners are, the minimum people of getting out on parole right now is very minimal.
Okay.
So we're saying, let's take a look at the old law prisoners. They really have a right to get out on parole, but it's not happening. They go up before the parole board, and they're denied. They go up, they're denied. They go up, they're denied. And for what reason? For what purpose? When they've done everything.
Time served.
Yeah, insufficient time served is what they say. So we're saying, okay, specifically state to this prisoner what has to be done. If this prisoner has worked all the programs that was expected of them, if their behavior is good, they put in over and above the minimum time that the judge had said before they could get out on parole, 3, 4, 5 years over and above. Okay, let's take a look at that now and specifically state what they need to do in order to meet this requirement. But what's happening in our state is you have the parole commission, and then you have the
Program review.
yeah, program review.
committee.
So, and those two agencies do not work together. So we're saying, get your act together, start communicating with each other. If the parole commission recommends this person for parole, and then the program review says, no, we're not going to do that, they're caught.
Yeah. I was just thinking of something, and it just slipped my mind now, but I will think of it again. And the weird thing is even when they do get out on probation, it's not even called probation anymore. It's called extended supervision.
Right.
And I don't know if just the name changed or if the guidelines or something about it changed when the name changed, but I don't know. It's weird. So since truth in sentencing has been in effect now for almost 15 years, I guess in another couple of weeks it'll reach its 15th anniversary. How have things changed since, other than what we just kind of talked about? What specifically has changed to the detriment for these inmates?
Well, they have no reason to want to do what they're supposed to do in prison, because that used to be an incentive for them. If I do this, then I can shorten my sentence and now there's no reason to do that, because no matter what they do, they're going to be there until the end of the time.
Okay.
So, and that was Judy Smith, yeah, the warden here in Oshkosh, told us that, and also said the other detriment was when that law went into effect, they never asked those that work in the prisons.
Wardens.
They never asked the wardens. They just put it in effect and did not give them any resources. So now they have more people because they're staying longer without the incentives to try to get out or try to better themselves.
Well, and one of the problems that I see, you know, both as a citizen and a taxpayer and as an individual, because my partner is in corrections, but more at the local county type level.
Okay.
But there's really very, very little that can be done for people with mental health issues. The mental health facilities are underfunded and overtaxed. And when I say overtaxed, I'm not talking about taxes because they probably don't pay taxes. I'm talking about their resources, their personnel are, you know, they have tremendous demands placed on them. That's what I mean when I say they're overtaxed and underfunded. And, you know, so they're telling a lot of the jails, and this is probably true in the prisons too, just keep them. We don't have any place for them to go.
Yeah.
Well, that's not right either.
No.
But
The
if we're
whole
not-
system seems to be broken.
If
Yes,
we're not
it is.
spending all the money on prisons, you know, we could transfer that money over to other kinds of treatment and care for people.
I personally think, and it sort of ties in, of course, with what we're talking about here. I personally think that we need to delegate more money in this country to mental health issues, whether the people are imprisoned or not,
Yes.
or if they're in their local jails. You know, look how many, we see it in the news every single day. Someone, somewhere in this country is going off the deep end and hurting or killing innocent people. And why? Because there's something wrong up here.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I
And there's
mean,
no
you
help.
can sit back and watch TV and say, God, is that person messed up? Or wow, are they whacked?
Yeah.
But the reality is they probably are. You know, there's some kind of wiring here
Yep.
that isn't right. And we need to devote a lot more time, attention, and finances to mental health issues in this country.
Absolutely.
And then maybe a lot of this stuff would end or at least be greatly reduced. Because
Yes.
where are they going? When they're caught, they're ending up in jails or prisons.
That's right.
And then what's happening, they get in the prisons and, you know, they have the mental problems, so they act out. So then they're put in solitary confinement, which is another aspect that Wisdom is trying to bring to the fore. Solitary confinement is torture, more than 15 days. You put a person in there who's mentally unstable in the first place, and there's nobody there, there's nobody to talk to, nothing to do, and you hear the moans and the groans and banging on pipes and so on of other solitary confinement. If you weren't mental when you went in, you know, you'll come out that way. So that's not making anybody healthier.
Yeah, you'll come out worse.
That's right.
And then when they're released, it's going to be all the worse. You're right.
And
You were going to say something, sister.
In-
Or Mary, however you want me to address you.
Mary's fine.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with you about the mental health issue.
Yeah.
That is a big part of the problem, and truly why many of the people in prison do have mental health issues. But going back to truth in sentencing, you had asked that question. You know, one thing, it ties the hands of the judges because they have to give minimum mandatory sentences. So they don't have a choice. Instead of taking each case for its merit. And I'm a firm believer in that. You know, I'm a retired principal, and I know if someone came to my office that needed help, each case is different, and you deal with each case separately. But the judges don't have that alternative now. So a lot of trust is lost in terms of judges also, and people who are in the criminal system because they feel they've been wronged, even though they did something wrong.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's probably not really fair for anyone to be blaming the judges.
No.
Their hands are tied.
That's right.
It's the law. So as a part of this then, I would assume that you all are trying to get some kind of legislation passed to repeal truth in sentencing?
I don't think we've gone that far yet.
okay.
But,
I have to tell you,
But
that
you need
might,
to.
that-
I mean,
yeah.
That's right.
you can't
You're right.
accomplish this, I don't think.
That might be
without
difficult.
doing that.
because that law was written by our present governor.
Yes. That was
So-
his law before
that
he
was-
was the governor.
Don't even get me started on our present governor.
So,
well, I think there are some people feel that that was done in good faith, but it's not working,
Yeah.
and it needs to be reviewed and changed.
Well, and especially if you're getting some bipartisan support,
Yeah.
you know, from other Republicans, then there's a possibility. But I don't know how you can accomplish this lofty goal, which I think is admirable, but it is lofty. I don't see how you can accomplish it without changing truth in sentencing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, my belief is that if we start with some of the things that just seem so obvious, like compassionate release, old law prisoners, 17-year-olds, why are they treated as an adult? If we know anything about the brain of a 17-year-old, it's not developed till they're 23 to 25. And that's not to skin. We're not talking about violent crimes kinds of things, but we have 17-year-olds that should be in juvenile justice system and not in the adult system. So those are places where we can start, and I think we really have you know, we had an action day in Madison last Wednesday. We do action days ever so often, and this one, we follow up with an action. And what we did was every representative and senator received the blueprint for improving the prison system in the state of Wisconsin. I gave you a copy of that earlier. That's right here.
Yeah.
11 by 15 blueprint for ending mass incarceration in Wisconsin. And we took it to their offices, and if they were present, we gave it to them. If they were not present, we gave it to their staff members and asked them to be sure to give it to that person. And everyone was delivered one, was given a copy.
I think another thing is one way of reducing prison population is to sentence people to treatment instead of sentencing them to be incarcerated. There was a circuit judge in the southern part of the state, and she said for every person that she sentenced to treatment, she could have sentenced 10, but there was no treatment available. So we have these alternative kind of programs that, you know, if we can get those going and fund them, and it's much less expensive. And they say that the recidivism rate for people who go into these treatments is far less than those who are in prison and don't receive the kind of treatment that they need. They say that the best program for treatment probably costs $7,000. But to incarcerate somebody for a year is around $30,000. So if you only talk about financial issues, it makes more sense to put more money into these alternative programs.
Sure, and I want to talk about some of those because we do have a number of them here in Winnebago County.
Yes.
You know, the one that I'm thinking of in particular is the drug court, which I have had, you know, Judge Scott Wolt on a number of times, and Judge Barbara Hartkey. You know, they're the two who started it, and it's a program that, I don't know, maybe you know better than I, but I'm thinking it's about maybe 5 years old now, something like
Somewhere
that.
in there.
And we have had them on, I believe, every year since its inception, and they have shown too that you know, they're having good success with the drug court. You know, the recidivism rate on the short term is very good, but you know, it hasn't been in place long enough to really have longitudinal studies to see long term how successful or not it's going to be. But hopefully, you know, not just for the sake of all of us citizens and taxpayers, but for them.
That's right.
Yes.
You know, it will continue to work as well as it is in the short term. But I was noticing something here, and you said it too, Sandy, where you're talking about helping people stay out of prison. Well, the way to do that is to change the truth in sentencing so that judges don't have their hands tied behind their backs and say, well, gosh, I think maybe you only need 2 or 3 years in prison, but the law says I have to give you 10, or whatever the case may be. So, you know, I don't want to tell you how to run your campaign, but I think that has to be at least a part of it.
Yes.
So when we talk about, you know, this whole idea that you're trying to get across to folks here and trying to get put in place, we have to talk about race as an issue, because the racial disparity in who is sentenced and who is not is staggering. And it's one of those things where I have to say personally, I don't know. Did the chicken come first or did the egg? Are we dispassionate, and are we harder on minorities, in particular black criminals who come before judges in the court system? Or are there more African Americans coming into the court system because there are more problems within that community? And I don't know what the answer is. I mean, do you have any statistics, either in your blueprint or somewhere else in your work that that talk about that?
Well, one of the statistics is that over half the population in the state of Wisconsin in the prisons is black Americans, and yet we only have 6% of the state of Wisconsin, the population is black. So there's a disparity there.
Okay, tell me that again. One half of our prison population is black, and only 6% of our population in the state is black.
That's
Yes.
right. So
that's pretty staggering.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Another staggering statistic is Wisconsin. We like to be first, but this isn't an area we don't want to be first. Wisconsin is first in the nation of incarcerated African Americans per capita.
Yeah, and there's whatever that says.
I'm not sure what that says.
No,
Yeah.
I know. I think there's a whole long history of how black Americans have not had some of the opportunities that white Americans have had. Just when it comes to even the GI Bill, going back to something like that, and putting that in place, the white soldiers could get housing, whereas the black soldiers were a little bit discriminated against. And so as the generations went on, they didn't have as, and so therefore that in itself, the poverty in itself helps to breed some problems.
Well, sure. Go ahead.
And it's not only the African Americans, it's also the Native Americans.
Yeah.
Our incarceration of Native Americans is very high also, in
Well-
comparison to the rest of the nation.
Sure. Do your statistics go so far as to talk about the numbers of Hispanics? And I know we're very big, we have a huge population in this county of Hmong people. Do they have any
They
of
don't
those
have-
statistics in that article or not?
No, this article, this came out of the Northwestern in their, what was that, investigative series that they were doing on prisons, like just last week and the week before. This came out of November 20th paper, but they were showing the black arrests in this area per 1,000 compared to the white arrests per 1,000. And in Appleton, per 1,000 for black people, it was 1,433. And for whites, it was 137 were stopped and arrested. In Green Bay, per 1,000, it was 911 blacks compared to 114 whites. Here in Oshkosh, it was 780 blacks compared to 147 whites per 1,000.
And those were traffic stops, or what were those?
It was just stops for arresting black people, more than people of other races, at rates higher than Ferguson, Missouri. I think this was probably precipitated by what happened in Ferguson.
Well, I think clearly we have an issue, and we're not going to solve this either. Certainly not anytime soon, probably not in our lifetimes. But I do think we have a serious, serious problem in this nation with racial profiling.
Yes.
And that probably tends to tie in with the high level of blacks that we have incarcerated.
We
And they get tougher sentences, I think. Although in Wisconsin, with truth in sentencing, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But the numbers of convictions is probably higher among the black population.
I think so.
We meet with the Religious Caucus in Esther, and one of the pastors was African-American female who was from Whitefish Bay originally in one of the churches in the Neenah area. And in the short time that she was here, she did not move her family here. She just had to see how the atmosphere was, so to speak. And she was stopped 5 different times for never given a citation for no reason at all, other than we assumed because she was black. She didn't stay. She didn't stay. She went back to Whitefish Bay area. And firmly believed it was, there's that saying, driving while black.
I don't know that saying. What is it?
Driving while black.
Yeah, why were you stopped? Because I was driving while black.
Oh, okay, all right. I see what you're saying.
A friend of ours who is originally from Guatemala was in the northern part of the state, in the Shawano area. She and her husband were going to visit Father Luke Ferris, who was associate at St. Raphael's before he was transferred to Shawano. And she was stopped. She was driving. And the officer asked her what she was doing there. She said, we came to visit a friend. He wanted to see her license, okay? It was like the 3rd degree. And finally, he said, where are you from? She said, Ripon. Well, what are you doing in Shawano? We came to visit a friend. And finally, when she said who the friend was, then it was okay.
I don't have a problem with an officer asking for your driver's license.
No.
I think that I have watched a lot of news programs since all this stuff with Ferguson, Missouri, and New York City, and you name it. There's a racially profiled type case or some kind of a race-motivated case. Anytime you turn on the news, we can't get away from it. So I've been following a lot of this stuff. And there seems to be this stigma with a lot of people, no matter what their ethnicity is, that, well, the cops don't have a right to ask you for your ID when they stop you. And in fact, they do.
Yeah.
And if you would just be polite and show it to them, no big deal.
Yeah.
But I do think, I agree that, blacks are stopped more often than not. And I just want to say something right here to you guys and to the viewers. I use the words black and African American interchangeably. I have black friends. I know black people, and I've always said to them, what vernacular do you prefer? And they say we don't really care. Just treat us with respect. And so
Yes.
I don't mean it in any kind of a disrespectful or disparaging way. So I just want to put that out there. I'll say both. I just think we get too caught up in political correctness in this country, instead of focusing on the real issues,
That's right.
So that's my little soapbox
Yes.
thing on that. But so getting back to this, so
Could I say one more thing about that?
absolutely, Sandy, go ahead.
There is a black woman that I know, and she had some trouble in this city because her children were stopped. She was stopped. And I realize what you say, that an officer has a right to ask you for your license. But my children were never stopped like that. I was never stopped like that. And so when I hear other people say, and I look at them and I see their color is different, and they're law-abiding citizens just like I am, and to hear that they're stopped on a regular basis, it makes me think there is a real problem.
Oh, I totally agree. I absolutely agree that there's a racial profiling problem. But so are you saying that when white people were stopped, they weren't asked for their ID?
I'm saying they weren't even stopped.
They weren't stopped. Okay, so we're on the same page.
Right.
There. We
Right.
agree about that.
Yes.
What kinds of things, what types of alternates to imprisonment or alternatives to prison are you hoping for? What are you advocating for as part of your blueprint?
Treatment alternative diversion programs. That's a big piece of it. You were talking about mental health before. I don't know if you're aware of the fact that Outagamie County had a mental health court, and their first graduate was about maybe 5-6 months ago. And she was on TV, and it was so refreshing to hear her. She graduated. She went through the program, and she now felt like she finally received some help for her issues.
Treatment Alternative Diversion Programs. Did I get that right?
Yeah,
That's
referred
right.
to as TAD, T-A-D.
Okay, all right. That's easier
it's
to
kind
say.
of another
TAD programs.
Yeah, it's kind of like treatment instead of prison, but those are the programs.
And so I know you said before, a few different times, I believe, that this is not for like the worst of the worst.
Right.
So what types of inmates would we be talking about here? What types of crimes would they have been convicted of and in prison for?
Probably drugs.
Okay.
Not out there selling it, but, taking drugs, being stopped, having 13 grams or whatever of cocaine in the car or
Okay.
whatever. So that would be mental health issues, probably forgery of some kind,
Okay.
things that get treated as a felony, and
Now this might be not those that are in prison now, but those that are on parole or on paper, or however they stay it now. They can be brought back into prison for violating something that, like taking a job offer without getting permission from their parole officer, or
Using a cell phone.
using a cell phone,
Computer.
or a computer that wasn't approved of. I mean, things that we would take for granted as a citizen to
Sure.
just use, and so some of those things don't seem to make sense. The reasons for putting them back into prison, revocations.
Well, it sounds archaic
Yes.
to me when you say things like using a computer or using a cell phone. I mean, as a reporter, I have covered a lot of court cases in my career, and I have sat through sentencing and the sentencing guidelines and the restrictions and so on and so forth. And when they get out, I have never heard of that you can't use a cell phone as a condition of probation. I've never heard of that. A computer, yes, if it's a computer-related crime, or offense, but never a cell phone. I mean, unless it has been related to drugs and they've been using the cell phone to, communicate with other people. But, I mean, do you see that as a condition of probation very often?
I don't know. I was surprised when I heard about it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's the use of it or it's the purchase of the cell phone.
Okay.
They can't purchase a cell phone or purchase a computer.
But if
And-
they have permission from their parole officer
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
or probation officer, then they can.
Yeah, and they refer to them oftentimes as their agent.
An agent.
Their
Okay.
agent.
Okay.
And if they break their curfew, or if they go across state lines without the agent being aware of it. So it's some of those issues. There are about 25 to 45 rules that can easily be broken, and sometimes very innocently and not aware of it. And they could end up back in prison as a result of it, with no trial, no nothing. Just
Well, clearly, we don't have enough prisons for what we're, I mean, here we are talking about reducing the prison population,
Yes,
but we don't have enough prisons when they continue to imprison people
Yes.
and sentence people at the
Or put
rate
them back
that
into
they
prison,
are,
yes.
or putting them back in for violations.
Right.
So what we're asking the state to do is to revamp the requirements. Try to come up
Yes.
with some things that will help the person out on parole, who's on paper as we refer to it, to become successful rather than to end up being a failure again and back in prison. So maybe you extend their curfew a little longer. I mean, we're talking about adults, and give them some opportunities.
And another is the bracelet, the technology, the GPS that is used. They found those to be very faulty. They would break the signal because they were in a building, and to the parole officer, they're doing something wrong because they're out of the area when they really weren't.
Are those things investigated, though? I mean, if the person says, hey, I was here, here, and here, I didn't go anywhere that I shouldn't have been. I mean, do they, if they know that the bracelets are faulty, do they at least look into those cases and say, Yeah, you really were where you said you were?
I think it depends on
the agent.
on the agent. Sometimes they're back in prison and then they lose their job because they missed a day or two of work. You know, we know someone who's working with us who's on the bracelet, and he said, luckily my employer is very understanding of the fact that sometimes this happens. But he said not everyone is, and he's really working to get that changed, because he said, okay, you know, I did something wrong and I don't deserve to have a faulty bracelet that makes me miss a day of work, or is going to put me back in prison, or tell the parole officer that I'm out of the state when I'm really not.
Yeah.
And the GPS monitoring came into existence in 2007. And this particular person that we're speaking about was not even sentenced to be on the bracelet. He's on it for life. And he's like, you know.
Well, and the bracelets, I mean, you know, they aren't, I'm a proponent of the bracelet program. I think it's good to help keep people out of jail and prisons. But, you know, I heard of a case in Colorado where it was a sex offender, and not someone who slept with their underage girlfriend. I'm talking about someone who preyed on little children. And he cut his bracelet twice. I mean, the most recent case was just this past spring or summer. I mean, there was a nationwide manhunt for this individual. They knew that he had cut his bracelet previously, and yet they put him back on it, put him in a halfway house, and he cut his bracelet again and took off, and they eventually found him out east somewhere. I don't know if it was Massachusetts or Vermont, somewhere out east they found him. So, I mean, it's not, I mean, it's technology. We all know technology fails. Just try and get on the internet when you want to get on it.
That's true.
So, and yet we have to have some things in place.
You're
I
right.
mean, this is an alternative to imprisonment.
Yeah.
And that's what we're all trying to get here. What other types of things? So, you know, programs like the drug court, the teen court, STOP, what have you, bracelets. What else are you guys, with your movement here, trying to get put in place instead of imprisonment?
Another one is ban the box.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Applications, when people apply once they're released from prison and they're looking for a job and they fill out an application. Most places of business, except in the state of Minnesota and Hawaii, because they don't have it, they have banned the box. But on applications there will be a box that says, have you ever been convicted of a felon? And then you have to check it. So when the PR, the human resource person in that company starts looking through applications, they see that box checked, many times it just gets thrown in the wastebasket then. They're not even going to give that person an opportunity to come in. So ban the box, don't put it on applications, and let the person come in and you interview them for their qualities and their gifts and find out if they would fit. And maybe through the interview they might find out that, you know, maybe they do have a record of having been in prison and so on. But if it doesn't interfere with the kind of job that's being offered, is there such thing as a second chance?
Well, and, you know, the other thing, even if they were to ban the box, I don't know about other states. I'm sure that every single state has something like we have here, CCAP. You know,
Yeah, we do.
And I'm sure that other states have something very similar. You can just go on there and look up and see what people have. I'm a fan of CCAP. As a reporter, as a landlord, I have used CCAP a lot. But it can be dangerous, I think, if you don't know how to look at it properly. You can't just say, oh, well, you know, John Doe here, he was charged with this, he was charged with this, and oh, look at this, he was charged with this, and just chuck his application or whatever. You have to follow it through and see what the end results were. Was it something that was dismissed? Or,
That's right.
You know, you have to, and sometimes you have to dig a little deeper than just what's online too. So, you know, it's one of those things, it's a double-edged sword. It can be very, very helpful to people like me, but it can also be very, very dangerous if people aren't looking at things
one
with
of
a
the
very
things that
cautious
they're
eye.
advocating is if the person has never been convicted in the end to take that off the CCAP thing. Nothing ever comes off; it all stays on.
Yeah, it does.
And so to take some of that off that
Yeah.
never was actually proven would be a help to somebody.
Is that part of your?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good, good. Glad to
Yes.
hear it.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
another thing that's going on is that there are some people in Esther who are contacting some of the businesses in the area to see if they're open to hiring people who have come out of prison. And actually there are a few of them that say yes. They're looking for people who will show up and who will do the work, and they're willing to consider them for employment. So I think that's an important thing that has been happening too, that people in Esther have contacted some businesses in the area to see if they will hire those
Okay.
who have come out.
We're down to about 2.5 minutes here, and I just, in our remaining moments, I know that you all are part of a faith-based movement. Is this a movement that anyone can get involved with helping out?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
And, how
some-
much time would they have to put in as a volunteer?
As much as
as
they
much
would
as
want.
they want.
Or as little as they can
That's
do?
right.
Okay.
Yes.
And how would they go about, I believe we've been putting the website up,
Oh, Pray for Justice
Pray for
in
Justice in Wisconsin,
Wisconsin.org.
yep, yep.
That would be one way.
And I think we've been, yeah, it's up there right now, in fact.
Okay.
So people would just go there,
They
and
could.
then it would give
Right.
you a place to
Yes.
apply for a volunteership or something like that.
Right. Or you can go ahead, Mary.
And if they're really interested in the prison reform situation, because there are other issues that Esther works on. They work on immigration. They also work on transportation. But if they're interested in the prison reform, our TIP task force meets the first Monday of the month at St. Mark's Lutheran Church on the Frontage Road in Neenah at 5:30 to 7. And we're pretty prompt about starting on time and ending on time.
5:30, and it's at St. Mark's in Neenah.
St. Mark's Lutheran.
St.
yes.
Mark's Lutheran
on
Church.
Green Bay Road.
On Green Bay Road.
Oh, okay, I've driven by there many times. And it's the
Yes.
first Monday of each month, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
5:30 p.m.
We welcome anyone who'd like to join us. Even if they think, maybe I am interested, maybe I'm not, come find out. It's
Okay.
a great group of people.
And so what kinds of things, if someone was interested, what types of things would they have to be doing? Some people are all about contacting legislators about problems that they see. Others, no. You want me to contact a politician? No.
Yeah.
They're vermin to me, you know? Not to me, but you know, some people have that attitude. So
That's right.
what kinds of things could they do?
Well, they could actually get involved in the basics of the organization if they wanted. You know, like we need people on a board. You need people. The biggest fundraiser for Esther itself is their banquet once a year.
Okay.
You need people to work on that. They do a silent auction. So there's all kinds of behind-the-scenes kinds of things to keep the organization going.
Okay.
If
And
there's
there are other things, like there's a group called Circles of Support.
Okay.
And they, like to have volunteers come in too. And
Okay.
they meet with people perhaps once a week who have come out of prison and help them, work back into the community. And so I think that's an important
Okay,
thing
excellent.
also.
And Circles of Support
I'm
is in
sorry,
Oshkosh.
we're out of time.
Okay.
I gotta wrap it up. Sorry, we could talk for another hour
Yeah,
probably.
good.
But thanks very much for being here.
You're welcome.
And
Thank you
they
for
can go to the
having us.
website
Yes.
and find out more information too. And by the way, this is our last show of the year, so we want to thank you all for watching us throughout the year. And that's on behalf of both me and the crew here. And we've got a lot of interesting, exciting shows already planned for the coming year. So we hope you'll stay tuned into 2015. But have the very happiest of holidays and a blessed new year, and we will see you in 2015. Until then, thanks to you, thanks to all of you, and you keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.
Oh,